Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. So today is an incredibly exciting day for transit in Toronto. I'm filming this, the night before I release the video, so I am referring to the current day, which is the day that the federal government announced that they're going to spend something on the order of $12 billion to fund not only just the current Ontario government's subway plans within Toronto, but also the Hamilton LRT project. Let's talk about it. So before I get into talking about subways in Toronto, I do need to make a bit of a disclaimer. I was supposed to be doing a video on MARTA today. A lot of people wanted me to do a video on MARTA for a long time, and it just seems like the universe does not want me to do it. If you saw my Twitter, you would have seen my tweet about this. Make sure you're following me over on Twitter so you don't miss tweets like that and more great content. Anyways, the news of the day is that the federal government, Catherine McKenna and Justin Trudeau, announced that they will be funding their portion, 40% of the various subway projects in Toronto. And I thought, wow, this is a pretty huge moment. I think because these projects have been ongoing for so long, we've got the sense that they were just going to happen, but this really seals the deal. The way I kind of like to look at the projects is as follows. You have the Yonge North Extension, which extends the busiest line in Toronto at the moment, the Yonge Subway, obviously one of the busiest lines in North America, up to Richmond Hill Centre on Highway 7, meaning that both ends of the Yonge University Spadina line will be touching Highway 7 in York Region, connecting up to the Viva BRT system. Yes, I say BRT in quotations, and if you're from Toronto, you know why. Now, the Line 2 subway extension eastwards is going to extend Line 2, obviously the Bloor-Danforth line, up to Scarborough Centre, and actually north of Scarborough Centre to Shepherd Avenue and McCowan. So it's a 3-stop extension. It's going to include, as I mentioned, the stop at Scarborough Centre and at McCowan and Shepherd, as well as a stop at McCowan and Lawrence. So very exciting extension, finally bringing Line 2 to Scarborough Centre, getting rid of the RT, which I will weep for because I don't think it needs to be removed, but it's what we decided we needed to do. We need to spend billions to dig a new subway tunnel where we already had rapid transit access, but you do you, Toronto. I will say it's also been amazing as a Scarborough resident who is aware of the general public support for the Scarborough subway extension to constantly hear for the past several years that people in Scarborough just wanted an LRT. No one really wanted the subway extension. And the amount of people excited about the subway extension seems to refute that point. Anyways, just thought I'd comment, since I live in Scarborough. Next up, we have the Eglinton West extension, which is oft maligned. It's very confusing. The Eglinton West extension is going to extend Toronto's third most important subway line, the Eglinton Crosstown, which still isn't open over 10 years after it started construction. It is an exciting extension though. It will be a tunneled extension west from Mount Dennis all the way to Renforth Gateway. Now, it's very strange that people are still sort of obsessed with the idea that this extension should have been at grade. I totally couldn't agree less. Putting transit at grade is going to inevitably make it slower, especially in Toronto where we refuse to give surface lines signal priority. High quality signal priority, that is. I want to remind everyone that the Eglinton Crosstown is not set to have high quality signal priority, and none of the typical LRT supporters out there seem to be really fighting hard to get it signal priority, and so it just leads me to wonder what people's motivations are for wanting lines at the surface. Anyways, I have for a long time said the Eglinton West extension should be elevated. It's not going to be too bad. Could have saved money that way, but the line will be grade separated. It will be in a tunnel. There will be, I believe, 1 or 2 elevated stations around the Humber River, but beyond that, it's a tunneled extension. If you ask me though, it's always made sense to have this line grade separated. Not only is it the fact that Line 5 is an important route across Toronto, it's the most logical crosstown route, like truly crosstown route across the whole city and into Peel Region, but also because it's connecting to major trip generators on the western end at Pearson and at the Mississauga Transitway. Everyone knows I lament the fact that the eastern end of the Eglinton Crosstown was put at the surface, but putting both ends at the surface would not be great, especially because we're trying to create a high-quality rail link to Pearson Airport, and you're not going to have consistent travel times if you have an at-grade line, which is pretty important for a line that's going to the airport, a place where you need to get to in a set period of time. Now, to be clear, the extension doesn't go to the airport quite yet, again, just to Renforth, but it is a big step towards the airport, and the final extension is not all that long, so once the Greater Toronto Airports Authority decides what they kind of want to do with the whole Union Station West project, we should be able to extend the Eglinton Crosstown up there fairly easily. And I think that would be great, because I truly think it makes sense to have the Up Express, the premium express transit service to the airport, and a TTC service, which should be the Eglinton Crosstown, running as a subway, because it is part of the subway network, to the airport and providing trips between Pearson and the rest of the TTC network very quickly. Of course, in the long term, since literally at this moment we're seeing transitways converted to LRT operation in Ottawa, the natural step in the future will be to convert the Mississauga Transitway to light rail and either have through running or have a transfer at Renforth Gateway to the Eglinton Crosstown. It just makes way too much sense. And having that consistent grade separation, because the eastern portion of the Mississauga Transitway all the way up to Mississauga City Centre is grade separated, just makes sense. Why would you have a line that goes to grade separation and then in kind of a suburban area where you have lots of room, it should be easy to do grade separation. You go to operations with grade crossings, mixed traffic, and then you go back to grade separation as you get to central Toronto. It just doesn't really make sense, especially since we're not going to have another high quality link between Toronto and Mississauga City Centre, which is the centre of Peel region in the coming years. So I think it's really important. And then finally, well, there's the Hamilton LRT. I talked about it a little while ago. Basically, the province came out and said, we have money, but you're going to get like 3 stops with the money we have set aside for the Hamilton LRT. And the feds have hopped in. It sounds like quite a bit of money will be dedicated to the Hamilton LRT. So Hamilton will be able to get a pretty solid light rail line between McMaster and the city centre. And yeah, I think Hamilton should be happy. It's going to get the light rail line it wants. And yeah, another city in Ontario gets a light rail line. People seem to have this impression that I think light rail is always bad. At the end of the day, obviously it's better than buses. I mean, I like rail vehicles as much as the next person. There's going to be a video, an explained video about light rail soon. So if you're not already, subscribe to make sure you don't miss that. But yeah, you know, Hamilton LRT, it's hard to argue that we in Ontario at least could imagine a better solution than it as a project to serve Hamilton. I think that the REM East and Canada line show you ideas of what could be a really good solution for serving an area that doesn't necessarily need massive transit capacity. But you know, it will be a big improvement. And whether you like it or not, LRT or any major infrastructure investment is going to drive development, and Hamilton will likely see a lot of redevelopment along the line. And I think it's nice to see the H in GTHA finally starting to build out with lots more development and high quality rapid transit. So I'm happy. You know, what can I say? It's not my favorite mode, but I like trams. I think they're cool. I think Hamilton is actually a really good opportunity to fix mistakes we made on our other light rail lines, namely the vehicles being mediocre, gray vehicles, as well as the station and stop designs on the surface section of Eglinton, which aren't great. Ontario can hopefully do better on that as well, but Eglinton hasn't been great. Better interior designs for vehicles. Again, watch the explained video that will be coming out later this month, because I'm going to talk about a tram system that is great, that we should take a ton of inspiration from, and that should start in Hamilton or Ontario, because we have work to do. We don't even do light rail as well as we could. Okay, and now we're at the big one, the Ontario line. So if you kind of think about it, we have seen a transit project kind of built in each sector of the GTHA. You've got the Yonge North extension serving York region a bit. You've got the Scarborough subway serving the eastern part of Toronto. Everyone treats it like it's a separate city, but serving Scarborough. You've got Eglinton West kind of serving Peel, just barely, but Peel's getting the Ontario LRT. And you've got the Hamilton LRT serving Hamilton, and then you've got the Ontario line serving the core of Ontario. I mean, Toronto. And anyways, Toronto is the core of Ontario. But the Ontario line is a super exciting project. It is interesting, though, how they're very nicely geographically distributed. So this is the line that serves the core of the network, right? It helps to relieve the congestion on Line 1, which, let's be honest, might be a little bit better after the pandemic, because legitimately, some people will be working from home that were previously using the line. That being said, there was probably a lot of latent demand, so we'll see what happens. Ontario Line is going to be a great project, though. I think that it introduces a ton of stuff to rapid transit in Ontario that the REM is already introducing in Quebec, but it's doing a ton of great stuff, and I hope that the smart ideas used in the Ontario Line rub off, mainly in Toronto, where we decide that new lines can follow the kind of standard of the Ontario Line instead of the traditional Toronto subway stock. But I also hope that there's an influence on Vancouver, who is looking to build a lot of new SkyTrain lines as part of the TransLink Transit 2050 plan. What am I talking about with regard to those standards? Well, automation of the trains by default, platform screen doors. We haven't actually heard about Wi-Fi, but surely Wi-Fi. I mean, the REM has it. We've got to have Wi-Fi, right? Elevation and operation close to existing rail lines, and of course overhead wire power, which you see on modern subway systems around the world. It brings so many important ideas that we just don't seem willing to accept to the Toronto transit scene, and I think it's very exciting for that. It's also going to provide transit access to some really important areas of Toronto that just don't have subway service right now. So Thorncliffe and Flemington Park, you're going to have interchange with Line 5, so Line 5, the line with many interchanges, gets another interchange. You're going to have connectivity with Line 2, obviously, at Pape, a cool new bridge over the Don Valley, most likely. Hopefully it's something dramatic. There'll be connectivity with GO at East Harbour, which is looking to be a really cool little center, Canary Wharf type place. That's my hope for it. Then you have the station at Corktown, which has some awesome transit-oriented development planned around it. You should go take a look at that. I'll see if I can link it in the description below, but that's going to provide really good access to the Distillery District and that area of the city. Then you're going to obviously have the core downtown stations providing more interchange with Line 1, and then service to the west, which I think that it hasn't really sunk into people's mind yet, but Queen and Spadina is going to have a subway station, which is really interesting as someone who spent a lot of time riding the Spadina streetcar and walking up and down Spadina Avenue. King and Bathurst is going to have a subway station. Again, very cool. It kind of hasn't sunk into people's minds yet. Liberty Village will have subway access via exhibition. So on the whole, the Ontario line is just massively exciting, and when we have it, it's truly going to transform the city. The access to different places is going to be totally different. I think that often when you live in the city and you use transit primarily, as I do, then you plan your life around where you can access on the subway. And with the Ontario line, so many trips that you couldn't easily make before will be easy to make. You'll be able to go to Ontario Science Centre or the CNE on the subway, which is such a unique idea. You'll be able to go to Liberty Village really easily, or to the Distillery District, which requires taking the King streetcar right now. So there's just so much opportunity and so much connectivity that this line is going to add, not to mention the other extensions, like now you'll have access to the Cineplex at Richmond Hill Centre. But you'll also have access to Scarborough Town Centre and the airport and Peel Region via the Mississauga Transitway. So these subway projects, they're really transformative. Line 5 makes our subway map look passable internationally. Currently, it's kind of embarrassing, right? It's just the U with a line across. But we're finally starting to get to a place where the subway system goes to almost anywhere you'd want it to go to. There's a few places where, for capacity reasons, it would be great to have subway lines, but the major destinations are starting to be all ticked off, and that's really exciting because I feel like that's where Montreal is, for example. Currently in Toronto, we have 2 major subway lines, and by the end of the decade, we should have 2 more major subway lines in the Crosstown and the Ontario line. Plus, Line 1 and Line 2 will be going much further. We'll have the Finch West tramway, as I like to call it. We'll have the tramway line on Finch West that'll connect up to Humber College. We'll have the line on Huron, Ontario, which will be connected up by the kind of spine of the GO RER project. Oh, and I forgot, the feds are also funding the 60 streetcars for Toronto, so the current streetcar network, which, yes, needs to be expanded into the Portlands, is going to have a sufficient number of streetcars. With 260 or so streetcars, the network should be able to have quite high frequencies for the whole thing, the existing streetcar network. So that is super exciting. And all of this sets us up to be on a path where in 2030, we're going to have a totally radically different transit system. And it's deeply exciting to me. It kind of sucks having to wait. And it's strange. There's a lag between when you make the decision to build a project and when you get to reap the benefits, right? Like the Eglinton Crosstown has been a thing that we're going to get for 10 years now. And when it opens up, I think it will be transformative. It's not my favorite project again for many reasons, but it has a lot of great aspects. And when that opens, it's going to be transformative for the city. But it's not going to be nearly as transformative as the 4 subway projects, Hurontario, Finch, GO RER, new VIA train sets, so intercity travel will be nicer than ever, expanded streetcar fleet, largely expanded electric bus fleet by then as well, Presto card that does everything it needs to do by then. 2030 is going to be amazing. Toronto will have world-class transit by 2030, I think, and I'm excited for the next 9 years of waiting, but there's lots of videos to make. Anyways, thank you for watching the video. I'm really excited about this funding announcement. It's the single biggest, I think, transit funding announcement that's been made in Canada, and it's larger than most funding announcements happening in North America at the moment. And so, yeah, it's a great day for transit in Toronto, and I don't know what to say besides I'm very pleased. I think the reality will come in the late 2020s and the early 2030s when it's just like line opening after line opening after line opening. Thanks for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.